This is a University of Otago podcast.
Hello and welcome to Otago University Vote Chat 2011. Vote Chat is a series of conversations with visiting politicians who come onto campus, and we film it in front of a live studio audience here in the media production studios. And we are basically filming this live streaming it live on the internet. Later it will be available to watch on YouTube and downloadable as a podcast on iTunes. And people are following it on the Twitter sphere as well using the hashtag OU Vote Chat 2011. Okay, so normally we've got MPs participating in this, people that are normally part of the political establishment, but today we've got someone from way out of the political establishment, John Minto from the Mana Party. Welcome, John.
Kia ora, Bryce.
Thanks for coming along. It's great to have you here because in some ways you're probably the most interesting, colourful, perhaps revolutionary and intelligent person standing for office.
Give me a round of applause. Come on, yeah.
No, you're right. It's really interesting to have you here. You've always got interesting things to say. I think there's a bit of a stereotype about you, actually. Well, there's probably lots of stereotypes about you, that you're just sort of an activist out there, sort of rent-a-mob protesting. But I've followed your career for a long time, and I've followed your speeches and your columns in the newspapers, blog posts, and I'm always just amazed how astute you are politically and how smart you are.
This man's very good.
Yeah, but I'm worried that by getting into all this parliamentary politics, that's going to be the death of that. Why are you standing for Parliament?
Well, I've never joined any political party before in my life, and I've always said that an activist can be much more effective outside Parliament than inside, and I think that's been true of most of my life. When this opportunity with Mana came up, it's definitely a party that has the kinds of policies that they were talking about and that I've been helping to develop are what I would call revolutionary policies in terms of New Zealand's current economic order, and policies that I support. I'm not sure if it's the right time for a party like this to go in, but we won't know until we've had a real crack at it.
Okay, I mean, I'm really interested in why you're with Mana, but I'm also interested why you didn't throw your lot in with Labour or the Greens, because they are left-wing parties that you could actually make a real difference in, perhaps. No,
I don't think so. Well, I think Labour has been part of the problem. I mean, we've had, since the neoliberal economic reforms, right, of 1984, we've had 27 years of government. 15 years have been with Labour, 12 with National. So Labour I see as being an even bigger part of the problem than National.
Bigger part of the problem?
Well, yeah, I do. I can't see that there's been any significant change in their economic policies. They've been tinkering around the edge of different things, and this election, I have to say, they're beginning to put forward more progressive policies, but they are so far, they are there with the 1%, supporting the 1%, and I think what Mana is doing, we're pushing policies for the 99%.
But nonetheless, Labour's the party that has the potential to be in government,
yes.
And therefore if you'd actually gone into Labour, yes, you might have swallowed a few dead rats, but you know, it's a diverse church, and you could have been there on the left of the caucus and made it into Parliament and actually shifted some of those policies.
Well, I would think that with Labour it's far better to work on the outside rather than inside. I see. I mean, I think Labour is so stuck where it is with its economic policies. It just, you know, I mean, they're wanting to raise the retirement age to 67, and you know, New Zealand can easily afford to reduce our retirement age if we have the right economic policies in place.
So what's Mana's policy?
Well, we would be looking to reduce it, to reduce the age rather than raise it. We haven't set a specific, specific age, but we would see. You will have an age by the time we get to election day, or
well,
there could be one over the next couple of days. But okay. What we're saying is that Labour's got the totally wrong approach. They're saying that working New Zealanders, the hardest working people, are going to have to work for 2 more years before they get national superannuation, right? And they'd rather do that than they would put some effective taxation on the 150 wealthiest New Zealanders who last year earned an extra $7 billion, more than the entire Working for Families package. So we're talking about serious income inequality in New Zealand, and that $7 billion earned by, well, not earned, that $7 billion of extra wealth gained by those 150 wealthiest New Zealanders, that money wasn't taxed because most of it came from capital gains.
So how do you take it back? I mean, how do you take it off them then?
Well, you do it by, I think you do several things.
If that's what you want to do.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, that's what we do want to do. We want to get the 1% off the backs of the 99%. That's what it comes down to. And it's very simple. We want to get rid of GST completely because GST is a tax on the poor. Working New Zealanders around the minimum wage pay 13% of their income through GST, whereas the wealthy New Zealanders spend 5% or less on GST.
But just getting rid of GST is not going to get
no, it won't. So you get rid of get rid of GST, and then you use a financial transactions tax to pay for that. And that is a small tax on the trillions of dollars that comes in and out speculating on the value of the New Zealand dollar. And the benefit of that as well is that we reduce the value of the dollar and increase the value of our exports.
But that's like for like, isn't it? The financial transactions tax would just be a tax switch, so to speak. And,
it is a tax switch, but it's a tax switch from people on low and middle incomes to people on high incomes, and that's the sort of change we need. And so the other, I mean, we need to bring back an inheritance tax. We need to have a proper capital gains tax, so that you take a New Zealander, you take everything they earn, you put it in one pot, and you say, it doesn't matter where the money comes from, this is your earnings for the year, we're going to tax it at your personal tax rate. Now that's the kind of policy Labor should be pushing, but they're not.
What do you think of Gareth Morgan's Big Kahuna? I've asked this of a couple of other politicians and no one seems to have read it.
I'm not sure about the Big Kahuna. Is this where he's talking about
the book that he wrote, where he's talking about everyone having
universal basic income?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that is part of mana policy to explore that idea. It's
but also a flat tax, isn't it? As well?
It's something I haven't read it extensively.
I'm not sure about. I'm not sure of the details, but the basic concept of having. Basically, you don't have any. There's no such thing as a beneficiary. Beneficiaries disappear, and everybody gets this basic income. There are real attractions in that, and that's something which is part of our policy to explore and develop further. And we'd be, keen to discuss that with him and with anyone who's interested in that idea.
But voters are getting a bit suspicious of parties that are saying they'll explore and investigate things. Yeah. So don't we need to say this is exactly what we'd do?
No, we're not in a position to do that. We've been trying to do in 3 months what other parties have been doing for 30 years. So we're at the early stages of that, but it's one of those things. I would hope in 3 years' time we'd have something a bit more fleshed out. But it's such an enormous change. It's going to need engagement and debate across the whole community.
Okay, so you think Labor's new policy is a shift to the right? Sorry, on the retirement age?
Oh, absolutely, definitely. Okay. Oh, absolutely. Okay.
Actually, United Future seems to have a more interesting policy whereby, if I understand it correctly, you can start getting superannuation from the age of 60, but it's of a lesser amount than if you just wait until you're 65, with the idea that you're spending the same amount, but you access it in different ways. Yeah. Does that have merit?
I haven't seen that idea. It's certainly, it would have more merit than what Labor's talking about. I think for heaven's sake, why are we continuing to put the problems of a totally imbalanced economy onto the backs of working New Zealanders? We're starting from the wrong point of view. In the last 27 years, and I go back to 27 years because that's 1984, which is sort of ground zero for neoliberalism. I'm not saying there was nirvana before then. There wasn't. And what we need to do, the reforms that we're talking about, are the first steps towards a much more radical change within New Zealand.
So you're going to tell us what that radical change will eventually be, or are you just talking about the first steps?
I don't know what it will be. We don't have a blueprint, and I think it's important we not have a blueprint, but we're saying these are the first steps, and these are clearly identifiable steps to reorient the economy completely so that it starts to work for New Zealanders rather than against them.
Okay, so you still haven't really convinced me about the $7 billion that you say the super rich have.
Oh, that's only the 150. Yeah. I mean, I'm leaving off the other 1%. Yep.
Yeah. So how are you going to take it back off them? So inheritance tax.
A proper capital gains tax, inheritance tax, progressive taxation, where people on higher incomes earn a lot more than that. Sorry, are taxed a lot more than they are at the moment.
So what sort of tax rates would that be?
Industrial relations, of course, yeah. Industrial relations, where you give workers more power to negotiate paying conditions of employment.
But in terms of the state having enough money to do the things that Mana wants it to do, it's obviously going to have to take money off the
Absolutely,
rich.
It would take. I mean, a proper capital gains tax would bring in enormous sums of money, which is not taxed at the moment.
What's not proper about what, say, the Labour Party or Greens are?
Well, the Labour Party is talking about a 15% capital gains tax, and that's just nowhere near what it needs to be. And it has to be this approach I talked about, which is you take all of your income, and it doesn't matter where you get it from, and put it in one pool. It might come from selling your house, or we'll leave the family home out of it. But if you're a landlord,
so you will exempt the family home.
We'd exempt the family home, and we'd exempt Māori land. Because for Māori who don't own, most Māori don't own a home, so they wouldn't benefit from having an exemption on capital gain there. But they often have an interest in Māori land, and they would be able to be involved in, I guess, getting the same exemption through the Māori land.
But is it not commendable, though, that the Labour Party have suggested it at all, in the sense that, I mean, when they list the countries that have capital gains tax, and we are there with only 2 others, so the fact that they're bringing it up at all is positive for the discussion generally? Oh,
yeah, I would think that, I would say that that's true. But then Labour are not talking about a financial transactions tax, which is now it's coming into centre stage internationally. And we've got Europe, we've got Germany and France now leading the charge within the European Union, and they're talking about a financial transactions tax. These are the kinds of things that send shivers up the backs of the banks and the financial sector, but resonate with the 99%. Now, Labour should have been pushing a financial transactions tax a long time ago.
Isn't the part of the reason they're not